Let's get this started. To kick us off, could each one of you briefly introduce yourself and share the origin story of your company? What problem were you trying to solve when you started, and how has your business evolved since then? Tiffany, let's start with you.
Thanks for Vikram, and great to be here today. For those of you who aren't familiar, Abcelera is a local biotech company that was founded out of UBC. So there were 6 scientists in a lab, and they were mostly focused on technology. And so they had developed a microfluidic technology, so very small movement of fluids, that they felt could increase the productivity of how medicines are actually made. The industry stats sort of show in general that to discover and develop and eventually commercialize a new medicine takes between, about a decade, 9 to 12 years, costs about $3 to $4 billion. And about 96% of programs don't even make it that far. And so there's a huge problem here in getting medicines that people need to them. Our founders believe that the greatest place that they could have impact and then also create the largest amount of value was in antibody medicine. So antibodies are nature's way of protecting us from infection and disease. They're proteins that our bodies make naturally. And the technology that they had developed was very good at being able to find the really rare ones that could be turned into medicines. And so the business model they followed was, rather than develop a company that could make just one medicine, which is sort of the traditional biotech model, is you focus your efforts on building one therapeutic, one treatment, one medicine, and you sort of push that all the way through the decades-long development. Rather than doing that, they focused doing long-term investments to build something that could make many antibody medicines. This was the idea. So from this core technology, Abcelera has grown now from 6 people to 600 people since 2012. And we've moved and evolved from being a purely technology-based company that was doing partnerships with other groups to one that's developing our own medicines. And this year we actually have 2 programs that entered clinical testing here in Canada. So that's the Coles Notes on Abcelera.
What an incredible story from UBC. Wahid, how about your story?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My story, I moved to Canada at the age of 17 and been part of a few exits in SaaS in the last few years. After the latest exits, we started a Victory Square Technology that's focusing on entrepreneurs that they have an idea, they have a business that requires a big brother and funding to grow. And expanded our portfolio company to over 25 companies, and nine of them being public. One of the latest portfolio companies, the Hydrate Technology, that I've been very hands-on with since the acquisition. The company was acquired in 2022 when the revenue was about $1 million at 1.6 million valuation. Went public in end of 2022. Fast forward today, we finished the last year with over 23 million revenue, and this year we're on track to double that, and with over 220 million market cap. So our focus is basically focusing on the US healthcare, that it's very fragmented and broken. And we try to create, and when you're in the United States, you're dealing with 50 different countries with rules and regulations. The COVID expedited the revolution in the health tech in general. People, and now the users expecting to receive everything at home. They're expecting to have access to the medication, to the doctors, to everything very quickly, which before that, they were not used to that. That's one of the reasons that large, pharmacy chains, they're closing over 10,000, 20,000 locations last year in the United States, because people have a different mentality from having access to the medication service and the doctors. So in the case of the hydrate, we're trying to help with that by having a very innovative way for the users. Doesn't matter if they want to have receiving the medication and services at home by the nurses, if they want to go to different brick and mortars to have access to these preventative medications, or they need to have a direct to the consumer's path in the full compliance across 50 states and offering those services. So, and again, we are a BC-based company that focusing in the United States healthcare, and being recognized as one of the fastest growing company by Financial Times in US and by Deloitte in US and Canada in the last few years.
Amazing. Well, Doug, it's on to you about Cardium. Tell us your story. How did you get started, and what problems were you solving, and how has your business evolved since then?
So hi, everybody. I'm Doug. I'm a co-founder of Cardium. My background is actually in engineering. I'm electrical engineering by training. And my journey started at a Vancouver tech company called Creo. That company was bought by Kodak in 2005 for about $1 billion. I was one of the principal engineers at that company. And I stayed on for a couple of years. And then I got together with the founder and the CEO of that company. And we're like, well, we'd like to build another great, successful Vancouver company. And so we didn't actually start with a particular technology. We started more with, what do you need to build a successful company? And so the first thing you need is a big market. Second thing you need is gross margins. And the third thing is, we wanted to have a fast time to commercialization. So we were like, well, we want at least a multi-billion-dollar market. We have to be able to at least get 70% gross margins on our product. And we want to be able to commercialize in 5 to 6 years. So we think we've achieved 2 out of the 3 of those goals since we started in 2007. We just reached market commercialization this year, so a little bit longer than we expected. But so we started the company in 2007, and we ultimately decided to focus on the treatment for atrial fibrillation. And that was a disease that could be treated effectively surgically, but not percutaneously. So we focused on transitioning something to require less invasive techniques for treatment. We started with 3 people, and we've now grown to about 600 people. We actually just got FDA approval this year, which is a huge milestone for us. We're starting to build our commercial and medical teams, and as I mentioned, we have about 600 people. And that's sort of where we are now. We're targeting, this market was about $3 billion a year annually when we started the company. It's now about $6 to $7 billion a year annually for the product that we sell, and growing at about 15 to 20% per year. So we're fortunate we picked the right market. We have the best technology in the market. We completed a large FDA study last year with better results than anybody else has in this field. But it did take us a little bit longer than we expected. So if you're doing a startup, probably be prepared for that.
Congratulations on your success. I'll go on to my second question here. BC's health sector is booming, but each one of you is working in a very different space: on-demand care delivery, cardiac medical devices, and antibody discovery. What do new innovations or advancements look like from your perspective right now? And where are you seeing the most exciting breakthroughs? Wahid, let's start with you. What does innovation mean for Hydrate right now?
So when we're talking about innovation, in general, innovation is not about the companies. The innovation comes from the customer's perspective, from the customer's usage. History always repeats itself. When we go back 10, 15, 20, 30 years, we see some of these giant companies. Doug just mentioned one of them, Kodak. At the time, they were huge. They fade away. We talked about Yellow Pages, Blockbuster, all these huge companies, they never adopted it with the customer's needs and what customer actually looking for. They started with something and they tried to repeat and repeat and repeat. But again, at a time, if you would have said, hey, a company called Netflix is going to come and replace all the blockbusters, everyone would have laughed at you. But now it's a different story. Same thing happened in multiple huge companies at a time. So when we're talking about innovation, it's all about the end users, it's about the customers. And I feel COVID expedited this industry revolution in some of the industry, including the health tech. Everyone wants to have access to medication, doctors, a solution in general for the healthcare, with easy access and affordable access. That's the end of the story. However, that we can help by the users to get access to that, especially as we see in most of the communities and countries, the population is growing, but the infrastructure is not growing. That's what the wait time is huge. That's why we see, some of the medications are not being accessible or being expensive. So when we're talking about what we're looking in the hydrate, we always try to look at from the other end of the lens. We look at who's going to be the potential customers. What are the pain points that they have and how do they want to have access to them? A very simple example, before COVID, if you would have asked 10 people, can you do FaceTime with your doctors? Or can you sit at home and order your medication comes to your door? I guarantee you 80-90% of them, they would have said, this is not possible. I have to go to the wait room. I have to wait for my doctor. And they're always late. And from the pharmaceutical, I have to go buy it. Now it's the other way around. They're expecting things to be done at home. Not only about the healthcare, but everything else. But healthcare was so behind from the innovation that I feel COVID broke that shell. And now all the companies that are presenting right now, they are taking advantage of this opportunity, that creating a great business that serves the end users and customers, and they're going to enjoy it. So from the Hydrate perspective, we're focusing on the same framework, which is easy access and affordable access to all the preventative for the patient. It doesn't matter if they want somebody to walk into their place and offer those services at home, in your office, at your hotel room, or you want to have a brick and mortar that you can walk into it, or you want to sit at home and see a doctor virtually and receive your medication. That's everything that we do is around that with the full compliance.
Nice. I like your customer first approach and learning from your customers. Doug, you're developing cutting edge medical devices. How is innovation showing up in your R&D and clinical work?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we're a very hardcore engineering company. We actually have mechanical, electrical, software, and chemical engineering teams within the company. So our goal at the beginning was to basically try to deliver something that needed to be a golf ball size in the heart, with 122 electrode sensors that can deliver thousands of volts into the tissue and push that into the heart through a straw. So how do we do that? So that's why it took us so long. We at the beginning thought it would be, we can do that. But trying to do something like that and deliver it into the bloodstream, where you have to worry about blood clotting, patient safety, all kinds of things, is very challenging. So we now have about 200 patents that cover our technology. And it's really, in the beginning, there was a lot of mechanical innovation. We've built and actually tested and now commercially produce the most advanced therapeutic device ever delivered in the human body, like anywhere. Wow. So it's a very technically difficult device to design and build. And so that was a lot of the challenges at the beginning, were mechanical and electrical. Now that we have a platform, we actually have a very large software team. And so we can actually get more data about the functioning of the atrium, because all of these electrodes that we deploy into the atrium can actually sense the electrical issue on the surface, the interior surface of the atrium, to allow the doctor to diagnose the condition. So we're gathering, thousands of data samples per second when we're in the atrium. That can be analyzed using software and looking to help. We have a lot of algorithmic teams that work on how to precisely measure what that data is telling us and display it to the doctor in a 3D view. And so there's a lot of software work. And then also we have chemistry as well, because the device has coatings on it that reduce the device or reduce clotting on the device when in the patient. So it's kind of all of those things is where our innovation has been.
Amazing. An engineering-centric company. Tiffany, AbCellera is known for its speed in discovery. What breakthroughs are you most excited about in biotech, if you can speak about them?
Sure. I think that maybe being a little bit more localized in the view, I think the thing that's really exciting right now, not just for BC, but for Canada as a whole, is that, as Vahid had said, like, coming out of the pandemic, I think there's been a wholesale change on, what is it that we should be able to do as a country in order to protect our citizens and to ensure that every healthcare emergency or every healthcare issue can be addressed. Obviously, that's a big ask, but as a starting point, what we have seen now is with a lot of the focus of the federal and the local governments, there have been a push toward driving life sciences in Canada and in BC. So that's really exciting for all of us on the call and anybody else who is in the province or even in the country, because we've hit really hard as a country in terms of innovation. There's a lot of stories, some on this panel, but broader than this, that shows that we actually hit well above our weight in terms of innovation as Canadians. And so, the thing I'm very excited about from a more of a patriotic standpoint is we're now seeing the coordination from industry and academia and government to try to move the entire life sciences and the opportunity of biotech forward. In particular, biotech we think it's probably the most exciting area to be in, and it impacts all of us. So some of the things that we're doing on our side at Abcelera is, we have been working toward building end-to-end capabilities. So Canada has not had the ability to kind of make its own medicines for some time. That's a sort of a 30-year deficit that we're now working to correct. And so we have built a technology that now we can go from discovery all the way to going into the clinic. And the idea is that we're going to be putting in programs that allow for our doctors, hospital staff, clinicians to build up the capability to actually bring and test these medicines right to Canadian and to patients in British Columbia. And I think that that's really important because innovation at the source level through the companies that's where everyone is excited, but ultimately you need to bring it to patients or to your customers. And how are we doing that right now in BC and in Canada? And there's a wholesale change that's happening that I think is really exciting for us. I think we are in a place that we've never really been before as a country. And I think that that's something that we should be focused on. So from a specific technology standpoint on our side, the other thing that we're really excited about is now that we have progressed our platform to a point where we feel we can apply it into areas that have been really difficult. So really challenging targets, drug targets, that is. And our first program is actually one of those. It's a G protein coupled receptor target that's actually in the brain. And so our lead program, ABCL 635, is actually targeting that to treat hot flashes or vasomotor symptoms in menopausal women. And so these are the kinds of things where you develop your technology. Are you able to apply it in a new area or to an area where there's a real need? That's what we're really excited about. And we are seeing that not just with our company in biotech, but across the board in the industry. So those are the two parts. One is how we're doing locally as a country, and then two, how we feel about the application of our technology in those areas as well.
Yeah, that's incredible. And Abcelera certainly has helped us punch well above our weight in BC. On to our next question. Commercializing health innovation is not easy. Timelines are long, the stakes are high, the path is rarely straightforward. What are some of the nuances of health tech and the customers that you serve which are most challenging? And where do you see the greatest untapped opportunity? We'll start with you, Doug.
Yeah, I think that the big challenge for us has been the regulatory process. So, and actually, I'll take a step back. If we go to the beginning, one of the reasons why it took us quite a long ways to get here. So if we started back in 2007, was a device like ours, you have to do a lot of development and testing before you can actually use it in the intended place, which is a live human heart. So we did a lot of testing on the bench, a lot of testing in animals, a lot of testing in cadavers, and things still didn't work quite out the way we expected when we went to a human, just because the human body is quite different. So I think what we learned from that is that you need to get much better at bench simulations. And that was one of the things that I would say early on, and especially with the advent of 3D printing, allowed us to develop much better models for simulation so we could be more effective when we went back and did additional clinical trials. But I think that's a risk factor for anybody that's working on a device that is an invasive medical device. Your models are just models, and you should remember that, and that there will always be a risk of when you go to the clinic. Certainly, we were heavily focused on safety, and our tests were safety, or our tests were all safe. They just weren't effective. And so that's kind of true with, anything that you develop. I'm sure Abceller is going to go through that with their clinical studies. That's why we have clinical studies. So trying to do as much work as you can before the clinical study to prove that the clinical study, which is very expensive, is going to work. I think it is one of the challenges. The next challenge for us was just the sheer cost of running an FDA study. So the final study in our process after we did many pilot studies was to run a large FDA study where we treated, for a medical device, not for drugs, but for a medical device, it was treating about 200 patients in multiple countries at about 15 sites in an audited study that was submitted to the FDA. That was challenging as well. I think the second part of your is what are the solutions that you can help address these things. I think it's like, the biggest thing you need to be is persistent and maybe even stubborn. So I would say that is an inherent quality that you'll have to develop in yourself if you want to succeed. It's certainly a long road and difficult. You, of course, should surround yourself with people that have done it before and use whatever tools you can. I don't think those are anything that's new about today versus the past. Like those have always been the case, I think, for any kind of startup. And there's sometimes hard lessons to learn. And until you've been there, you're like, oh yeah, this really is difficult. So I would just say, like the advice is the same as ever. Make sure you have people that have done it before advising you as you go through it. And that's what I don't know if that was exactly your question, but that's what I
No,
think
that
of when
was
you think
good.
about
Doug,
challenges and
just
what
a
was the
quick,
long road. Like,
just a
clearly
quick.
I've been at it for
What do you see
18
your
years now.
greatest? Where is your greatest untapped opportunity? That was the second part of the question.
Okay. Where is the greatest untapped opportunity? The one thing for us just to note is that one of the things when you just related to the initial question about manufacturing. So it's very important for our manufacturing to be in Vancouver because it's close to our engineering team. But we're also now, as we're going on a worldwide scale, we're expanding outside of Canada as well too.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, like we have our core in Vancouver, we're doing this, but as we expand to a worldwide footprint as a company, we have to look elsewhere for resources as well too. And that's not to say there's not lots of great people and you need to use them in Canada. It just, as you scale, that's what you need to do. So
Yeah.
I think that's the untapped opportunity for us is expanding worldwide.
Amazing. Tiffany, your turn.
I agree with so much of what Doug said. I think that the challenges inherent whenever you are in the field of health, the most important thing you're trying to do is protect the safety of patients. And so that is going to create a lot of rigor that you have to go through, sort of regardless of what part of the process you're in. And so, for Abcelera, I mean, we started, I said earlier, as a technology company. And this year was the first year that we actually took our own programs into the clinic. And so as a biotech company, in many ways, we're really at the start line. We actually haven't commercialized our own medicines yet. We did work with Eli Lilly during the pandemic, and antibodies that we discovered and co-developed did reach patients. But that arm of commercialization and actually the clinical development was all handled by Lilly. And so for us, I would say that our challenges moving forward are the scale up of our team into these new areas of drug development, for which there is not that much experience in Canada overall, and for which it's antibodies and the areas that we are pursuing are also quite novel. And so the challenges there are in us building our team, although I feel like we've been pretty successful in doing that. As Doug said, in certain things, I think in our discovery, we were very intrepid and there was a lot of folks who learned together. But when you get into the deeper phases, when you're getting closer and closer to patients, it's important to have that rigor and the type of team that can execute on that. I think that, if you take a few steps back in the process, I think there are a lot of really great ideas out there. I think ones that are even considered to be valuable in the world. But sometimes the value that we place on it, I would say even more morally or ethically, may not match up with the commercial landscape. Like you may have something great that could be very helpful to people, but is there a way for which that can reach people and a way in which that can help continue the company to grow? And so I think even before you go too far down, and Doug had said, it was a long road and there was many paths to look at. I think asking the question of, are you solving a real problem? And if you solve that problem, what does that mean? Right? I really liked Doug they had a vision. They knew what they were trying to capture, the time frame they were trying to capture it, and they had all that information. When you have that in front of you, when you have that understanding, I assume that makes the path more easy. AbCellera's road was more it was a different path. But now we are very clear about where we're going. And every program we look at we have to evaluate it on many different dimensions. And so I think that is probably for companies that are scaling up, is really understanding, is what you're bringing to the world going to create value, and a value that can generate value back for the companies and ultimately the people who are supporting you, your investors and your partners and things like that. And so I think for us right now, I wouldn't say it's an untapped opportunity. I think we're trying to tap it, which is in fact going into continuing to move our programs into the clinic and get them to patients. And so we expect there to be many more learnings along the way. And so we hope to be guided by, we've brought a lot of people on who have a lot of experience in this, and we feel very excited about our next steps. So I would say that know where you're going, and as Doug said too, keep excited about it, because it's what's going to pull you through.
Yeah, thank you. Vahid.
Yeah, so I think Tiffany and Doug answered this question, very accurately with the industry that we're facing with. And I think the way that you describe this question, the highlight for me is the path is really straightforward. When we get to anything healthcare related, as Stephanie said, the end goal is to help the patients, and we have to make sure the patient is safe when we do that. Now, we see two groups of innovation and companies. One is the one that is focusing on creating these solutions as a product, as a treatment, as a test, and they are companies that they're working on the innovation for delivery of those to the patients. However that works, that requires going through different paths. Now, the entire market, we're talking, like in the US, we're talking about the $5 trillion market from the healthcare, and it doesn't get better; it gets worse in a way that with the lifestyle that we are adopting, with the diets that we all go through, our body it's more exposed to be sick. So we need to focus on either preventative or testing to find them out, or to some sort of a cure if anybody's facing with that. So when we're talking about the innovation in this industry, the biggest thing is rules and regulation. There are so much around the compliancy. The more innovative you are, even the compliancy and the rules and regulation haven't looked at the way that you're doing your business, or you're bringing up your new product, or your case of the delivery. I'll give you one example. In our case, we deal with 3 different boards per state: pharmacy board, medical board, and nursing board. Now, you'll be surprised, some of these states and some of these boards, either they have contradictory rules and regulation about the same thing, or they don't even have anything about mobile medicine. And we got a call from one of our nurses in one of the states that they just got a notice from a nursing board that the mobile medicine is not prohibited in that state. One of her customers was the governor of that state, and we got on the call with all these boards to help them to come up with the most compliant way for people to be able to deliver the mobile medicine, which again, it's a new thing. But when you go through rules and regulation, as Doc said, sometimes it's not 0 to 1. You have to be relentless. You shouldn't give up. Sometimes you have to find the easiest way to get what you want. But in order for you to stay out of the weed and not get distracted, because it's very expensive for any of these paths that you want to go through it. And usually the nature of the startups and small companies is the startup don't have two things. They don't have enough time across the resources, and they don't have enough money to go all the way to the end. So we have to be very smart on how the time of the team to be spent and how the money of the company to be spent. So what I always say, start with the end goal. See where you want to go, and walk back to today and break it down into the smaller steps and checking points, so you can go step by step. Now, your plan may change a little bit. That's okay. That's the nature of dating a startup. But at least you're not going to go sideways. You're not going to get distracted with so many, shiny objects and completely going sideways without even hitting, the goals that you have. Then you're going to look at your bank account and see all the investment is gone. Nothing has been delivered that is, substantial in respect to the main goal that you have. And you have so many patients, partners, investors, clients that they're relying on you to delivering that.
Nice. Great answer. Great segue to what you just talked about, money and funding. From an investor's perspective, one of the biggest questions is how are companies in the health tech structure structuring their financing to get through long development cycles? I'm curious, looking back, what approach to funding has best worked for you? Was it traditional venture capital, strategic partnerships, non-dilutive sources like grants, or a combination of the above? And what gave you guys momentum to reach the next stage? I'll start with you, Doug. Cardium has raised funding to support device development and long clinical trials. How did you guys convince investors to take the long view, and what's been critical in securing that level of capital, given medtech is one of the hardest things to raise capital for?
Yeah, so I think we had somewhat of a non-traditional approach, probably. I mentioned earlier in the discussion that Cardium was founded by some of the founding partners of the company called Creo in Vancouver. Yeah. And that Creo acquisition was a $1 billion acquisition by Kodak. So the only reason we were able to get funding, I would say, is the success of the addition. Like, it was the historical success of those partners in the founding of Cardium. So I'm sort of the operational person. My contribution was sweat equity. Their contribution was their network. And Doug Gertzen could never have raised the money on his own, even with all my thoughts and whatever about building the company. It would have been possible. It was really the network that we had of people that had made money off of previous investments with the founding group of Cardium. Mm-hmm. And I would say, so when we went through, and that didn't make it easy by any sense. Like, when we went through Cardium's history, we started in 2007. 2009 was a very terrible economic time for raising money. We needed to raise money, basically wiped us out, like, from the equity that we had in the company at that time, to try to raise money and keep going. And then we had 2 failed clinical studies. I would failed in the fact that we had to redesign, and typically we operated with about 18 months of cash. So we would raise enough to go 18 months. That's sort of all we could get, and they expected to see results. So the only reason we were able to continue to raise money was through the network and the faith and the competence of the development team that we'd built at Cardium, and our being able to convince that network that, in fact, we were going to be successful. We never raised money. We did have lots of non-dilutive funding at the beginning with IRAP. That was helpful. But we never raised money through a venture capitalist. We used family offices. And so the challenge with most venture capitalists is that they have a 10-year funds that they're going to
Yeah.
return back to the limited partners. Like that was never going to work for us because they looked at our timelines and like, well, we're not going to get our return. Many family offices, if you can get connected to them, which we did have connections to, have longer time horizons. And then our more recent funding is through people that are like crossover financing or institutional investors that have a much more buy and hold philosophy. So if you looked at the strategic partnerships or the venture capital that you mentioned, we didn't use any of those. We used family offices, angels from Vancouver, family offices as the next step, and then institutional investors is what our path was. And
And
it's
these
just
family
like,
offices,
it's a relentless grind. Like um it's a lot of work to raise money for a
and these
company.
family offices were Canadian or
No, from all over the world.
okay.
So I mean, we did raise a lot of Canadian money at the beginning. So we had some big family offices from Canada, but we had connections in the US and Israel as well too.
Okay, so first bootstrapped with own money and then family offices and other grants and stuff.
Yep, that's right.
Amazing.
Yeah, and then we
Vahid,
brought in institutional investors in 2019, I think it was.
okay, great. Vahid, how did you guys fuel your growth?
So everything Doc said, it's 100% accurate from investments and investors. Um, in the case of the Hydrate, I had to wear both hats. At first, I came as an investor to acquire the business. Then we got into the public market and we started getting more funding coming in. I think the biggest thing that just kind of like summarizing what Doc said, which is 100% accurate, is if you're doing if you're looking for investors, not every money is your money. Don't go for it. Like the VC money, is sometimes the most expensive money that you can bring to your company, especially for the founders that their plan and their goal is a longer term, as Doc mentioned that. I feel like investor and the investment company is like dating. Two people can be great people, can be a great investor and a great company. They're not a good match for that specific purpose and that stage of the business. The same investor may be a great investor for you in the next phase of your business, wherever you go there, right? So it's key for any entrepreneur, for any company, to have a clear path of where they're going and how much funding is required with enough margin of the error, because again, that's the nature of the startup. You are going to make error. You're going to learn as you move forward. The better people, Doug mentioned something that, hey, he came as a sweat equity. That is as important as money coming in, because he's going to save a lot of time, money wasting in the company that if would have been somebody with less experience coming in, probably would have been, additional funding required to run the operation. So having a good team, and then based on that, you define your goals. Break it down. When you're communicating, and don't always show the hockey stick growth. The investors that are looking at your business, they do 2+2. They can see if you're going to get there or not, or there are going to be 3 or 4 or 5 steps before you get that hockey stick growth. If you have that clear communication and planning to your investors, you're going to find the right ones.
Yeah.
Again, it's a grind. It's not easy. When you do the first step and break it down, don't always shoot, don't go for a home run in the first round. Sometimes you need to break it down. Always having your own money and family money, there is another layer of the safety net for outside investors that are coming in, because they know it's not only about the idea, it's about the people. Is those people are engaged enough, they have enough skin in the game to actually push this forward. And again, that can be from in the form of sweat equity. It can be in form of your own money putting in, or your family money putting in, and moving forward. When you get to a specific size, and one point and one last point about that, don't spend money in a way that is somebody else's money. You have to bootstrap your business. Your first goal is to deliver your first product and get to profitability. Now, it may take 6 months or a year or 5 years or 10 years, but that horizon has to be, in your plan, in your roadmap. Then you're
Right.
going to look at different investors depending on their appetite and their thesis of the investment. Some family offices, they look at, hey, I want to have a great ecosystem in the healthcare. So finding another business that complete that ecosystem is a great addition for their group. Not only you get their money, you get their network, you probably have access to other partners and customers that are coming in. So the money that they're giving you worth more than the same, if the same money is coming from another VC or another investor that doesn't have the same network. As you grow, you're going to start opening your company to more people and getting them in. So having a proper plan to where you're going to start making money and you're going to deliver, have a clear communication, then go with, in the same way that in the marketing, you define the persona for your customers and you're going to start target them with the ads or with content to get the right people coming in. Not everyone is your customer. Don't hope for everyone. Same thing with investors. Go figure out which investor thesis, which investors' knowledge, which investors' background, which investors' network. It can help you to expedite your process to get where you want it to get. In our case, we acquired the Hydrate. We founded it, enough to get to a specific size. Then we went public, but we kept the majority of the shares with about 2 million investments. We didn't raise any money. We didn't borrow any money until the company became profitable. When the company can be profitable, we opened it to some institutions, some family offices for about 5 million funding. But at the time, the valuation of the business was about 70 million. And then when the valuation was about 150 million, we opened another 10 million for other investors. Now, sometimes it's not about the money. It's about the people who's going to support you down the road. So, Doug said something that I want to highlight that. A lot of people followed Doug and their group because they made money in the previous company that they had. They had a great experience. They rely on them. It's the same thing with your company. If you let the right people in early and they make money with you, they're going to come in the next round and the next round and the next round. But if you just want to keep it so tight, be greedy, go with the highest valuation and no one makes money with you, you're going to have a tougher time in the higher valuation or when things go sideways to get more money into the company.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Tiffany, you guys have had at Upseller an amazing success in partnerships with pharmaceutical companies and government-backed funding. How have those partnerships shaped your funding journey and helped you scale at speed?
Yeah, so Upseller has benefited from really a combination of many different types of ways to finance the business. Starting in 2012, it was at an academic lab at UBC. And so one of the, if you talk to Carl or any of the other founders, one of the key inflection points for the company was that they incubated at UBC for about 5 years. So in terms of the funding horizon, the first seed round was in 2014 and it was under $1 million. And I think it was mostly funded by one of our founders' brothers. So Vahid, to your point, having skin in the game, I think is a certainly good signal. But in that, for the remainder of the years, up until about 2017, Upseller really focused on doing partnerships with innovators in innovative biotechs and pharmaceutical companies. And that really actually drove our R&D. And so we were working on real problems. We were really validating the technology. And along the way, we started to generate revenue. And so being at the university and having that in combination with a partnership model meant that Upseller was able to delay some of the traditional financing milestones for several years, which can be very important. Again, if you take the idea, if you want to map out your long-term strategy, and I think this was mentioned earlier, is you can be in a position where you give up too much ownership of the company too early. And so I think being able to find ways to validate the business, the product, whatever it is that you're working on, in a way that is cost effective is really important because it does give you more optionality down the road in terms of continue to maintain control of your company. If that's something that you ultimately want to continue to do, if the idea is that you want to build something that has a shorter lifeline and you want to turn that around, hand it off or be bought out, that's fine. For Upseller, that wasn't the vision. They were needing to figure out how are we going to do this for more than a decade, which was the timeline that they were looking at. So from there, what also were some big inflection points in funding was in 2017. Abcelera was selected to participate in a program from the Department of Defense in the United States to develop a pandemic response. And so what we did was we actually adapted the existing technology platform to be applied for pandemic scenarios, and received about $35 million in funding for that over the course of several years. In 2018, we closed our first Series A, which was led by a deep tech venture capital group, DCVC Bio. So to that point, having a group that's really aligned, that understands the value you're providing and knows where you're going with that is important. As I think Vahid had mentioned, you need people who know where you're going and want to go there with you. And then also in 2020, when the pandemic hit, we were prepared. Our technology was able to respond. And so a few big things happened there. Because we were in that place, we also closed a Series A2 of 105 million, sort of in the I think it was Q1 of 2020. We received we co-funded with the government $126 million from the government of Canada for pandemic response. And we also decided to go public that year. So from Q1, doing a Series A2 at 105, and then in December of 2020, we did a IPO on the NASDAQ for $555 million US. And then in the years that followed, as we continued to focus on pandemic response and produce two different authorized antibody therapies, it generated over $1 billion in royalty revenue for the company, which was reinvested back in. And so what that allowed us to do was to complete building something that had been incepted more than a decade before. And that is in terms of technology, it's in the 600 plus people, it's in the over 300,000 square feet of lab and office space that we predominantly occupy in Vancouver. And it also, a big piece was also in developing a clinical manufacturing site. So to that earlier question about how important it is, proximity for this type of work is important. Yeah. Also being able to deliver it here in Canada is important. And as part of that, in May of 2023, we entered into another co-funding project with both the governments of Canada and the provincial government here in BC. Totals a $701 million project, of which we are taking 60% of the project costs to develop additional capacity and to be able to make up to 17 antibody medicines that will then be tested here in Canada. And so, the combination of, I think, being able to incubate at UBC, being able to generate early revenue, and because the company was lean and was able to stay at UBC, be able to generate revenue that got them to those next sort of milestones without being diluted out, was very important as part of Abcelera's journey. And then as we prove the technology, then you could see that the investors from all different directions sort of came. And so certainly there's lessons learned there, but I think the starting point again is, do you know what value you're trying to bring to the world, and what is the path you want to take to get there? And as both Vahid and Doug said, it's not going to be linear. But if you have a plan and you know where you may need to make changes, you're in a much better position to make those decisions and to decide if the people you want to bring along with you as investors or whatever, if they are the right folks. And that's important because, especially as you get into some of these more complex situations, you do want to make sure that people are aligned, because you don't want to spend too much time getting people aligned to your vision.
Thank you. I'm going to pass it back to Eric in the interest of time. We have 1 minute left. I'm not sure we have time for questions and answers and final remarks, but Erica, take it away.
Yeah, I'll take it back. I'll do a quick rapid fire final question to all of you. You got to do it in the, 1 or 2 sentences, maybe. We just always love to ask our panelists for some words of advice or key takeaways for our audience. So keep it in mind, we've got many ambitious founders on with us today. Yeah. I'll get you all to give me a quick final key takeaways. Vikram, you'll get the stage first.
Okay, so entrepreneurship is hard. Make sure you have a North Star, as Doug and all said. Get a mentor, get a coach. Make sure you go with stay humble and confident at the same time. And that's super important for your success. And also to the mentors and entrepreneurs who have been there, done that, and been successful. Please be generous with your time and money. Invest in these next generation entrepreneurs.
That's awesome. Doug, in one sentence.
Be persistent.
Yeah.
Perfect. Vahid? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, be persistent. Don't give up. Entrepreneurship is not what you see on Instagram. It's not like, hey, sitting on the beach, working hours, it's dark, it's lonely until you get to your point. But you can get to it. That's the reason that not too many businesses get to that level, is because people are giving up and they're using the hurdles as an excuse. Define your goal, go backward, never give up. And more importantly, one thing that Vikram said, for those who made it, pass the torch. Somebody were there for us to get us where we are today. We have to pass the torch if we can to next person and help them. And lastly, be humble and always learn. Like, again, I'm very grateful for all the speakers today. I personally learned so much from everyone, Tiffany, Dog, Vikram, yourself. It's life is about learning. Like, every day there is something new that you can learn with every person that you meet. And that's going to open up new doors for you that you're not even, don't set expectation when you have these relationships, because you'll be surprised how it's going to take you to the next level.
That's awesome. Thank you. Tiffany, the last words to you.
Yeah, I think I would just riff off of what Vahid said and note that the founders I've worked with, the ones that are very successful, I've noted take on this idea of being lifelong learners very seriously. Like it's not kind of a nice to have, it's a necessity. Entrepreneurship as a solo is not a real thing. You have to build a team very quickly. Every person I think is well suited to understand what are you really strong at and what are you weak at, and you need to bridge those gaps very quickly. And so those gaps in your knowledge you can bridge either with people, which is one of the best ways to bring in brilliant people who know things that you do not know. And then I would say, though, you have to continue to backstop that. As a founder, it is your job to know your business, not just the area of the business that you're most familiar with. So I see again, the most successful founders I've worked with are voracious readers, and they may be scientists and then they become absolutely dangerous when it comes to understanding business models, history. I mean, there's a lot of patterning in business, so understanding how that works. And at a minimum, you need to be very, very conversant in all areas of business, from product to marketing to the financing piece, to even have the right conversations with the other experts that are on your team to make those decisions. So I would say that my biggest point of advice is to understand what you're good at, understand what you need to bring up the slack on, and start bridging that gap as quickly as possible.